Okay, we're live, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the February 21st, 2023 meeting of the Stone Mills Township Council. You have the agenda before you. Any additions or deletions, Brian? Can I get approval of this agenda, please? Wenda and Krista Lee, any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We have, any conflicts of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof, none declared. We have 3 sets of minutes. Do you want these approved separately, Brian, or jointly? Totally at the discretion. Anyone want to break any of these out for approval or discussion, or can I get a motion to approve all 3? Sherry's moving to approve all 3. Can I get a seconder for that? Wenda, any discussion on any of those minutes? None? All in favor? That's carried. Delegations, deputations, and presentations. We have a delegation from Sideburn 2023. You're Sarah Barton? Sarah, please come to the table. Christina will show you how to activate the microphone, and the floor is yours. All right. She's way ahead of me.
Thank you. For the event called Sideburn, formerly known I've been an active member of this organization since its inception in 2017 and have been an event lead ever since. A little bit about me before I go into Sideburn. I've been a registered massage therapist for almost 20 years. I own and operate a clinic in Toronto for the last decade. And through this community, I've learned to do things like weld, build large art installations, and learn the intricacies of event production. All things I never thought I would be in my skill set as a 45-year-old healthcare professional. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, give you some more information regarding our beloved event that we intend to hold for our 3rd year on the property at 83 Doyle Road. We've held 2 of our 3 events at this property in 2018 and 19, both with participants around 800 campers. Our 2019 event resulted in no noise infractions, no major medical emergencies, and our 2 controlled burns went off without a hitch. A little bit of backstory. As you may be aware, our event is called a Regional Burning Man event. What does this mean? If you haven't heard of Burning Man, I'll do my best to sum it up in 1 minute or less. Burning Man started out in 1986 on Baker's Beach in San Francisco with a few hundred people. It has since relocated to the northern Nevada desert on a dried up lake bed from thousands of years ago, now hosting close to 80,000 participants, including a Kidsville of hundreds of families and Hushville, where participants over 70 years and over camp together. Our event is equally welcome to families and participants of all ages. Burning Man is guided by 10 principles: gifting, decommodification, acceptance, self-reliance, immediacy, participation, civic responsibility, self-expression, and my personal favorite, leaving no trace. Many of us running regional events like this make the annual trek out to the desert, and this past August was my 7th burn. Regional events like Sideburn have been going on for decades and span the world. In order to be able to call ourselves a Burning Man regional event, we have very strict guidelines set out by the Burning Man organization and overseen by volunteers called regional contacts, of which I have been since 2019. The focus of the guidelines is to ensure participant safety, community responsibility, and fostering long-lasting relationships with local town members where we hold our event. This includes making donations to local organizations and supporting initiatives within the community. There are 262 regional contacts globally and nearly 300 sanctioned events such as Sideburn all over North America, Europe, Asia, and one of the largest ones is actually in South Africa with 10,000 attendees. Our responsibility lies with ensuring regional events abide by a long list of requirements in order to receive sanctioning and to be able to use Burning Man intellectual property. This includes event permits, insurance, of which we hold $5 million liability, our Leave No Trace plan, and our civic engagement in host towns. This is why I'm here with you today. Burning Man is focused on art and community. It's probably the largest display of participant-built art that I've ever seen. Once you enter the gates at Burning Man or any regional event, there is no money exchanged, no vendors, no advertising of any kind, and no services beyond portable toilets and hand washing stations. Organizers work year-round to ensure all logistics, legal and safety matters are in place, and the participants make the event what it is by registering theme camps and art projects. Participants are expected to be radically self-reliant, bringing all of their food, water, comfort, and shelter needs for the duration of the event. We have a robust safety team of volunteer paramedics, nurses, firefighters, and rangers who round out our around-the-clock emergency team. As well, we have a board member on call for the duration of the event if the need arises to liaise with local authorities or emergency services. The bottom line is that we have an emergency plan for any possible scenario that might arise. All core volunteers are trained in FEMA Incident Command System courses that allow any possible emergency outcome to be handled effectively and safely. Our fire safety plan has been enthusiastically reviewed and approved by the fire chief for 2018 and 19, and we intend to use the same safety plan for this year. We also boast a strict sound policy to endeavor to be as neighborly as possible for our 5-day event. Sound is often the thing that doesn't get us welcome back into small towns. Sound engineers bounce the sound in a way that reduces noise for the nearest neighbors. These events are 100% volunteer run. Nobody gets paid. It's a true labor of love, and some of us volunteer hundreds of hours throughout the year to be able to host this event for our community. This may or may not include driving a total of 6 hours to make a 15-minute presentation to local town council. About Sideburn. We renamed our event for a couple of reasons, but primarily to better align and increase visibility that we are a sanctioned event alongside other regionals, hence the side of Sideburn. We are not an event that celebrates facial hair. This tells people we will be following the rigid requirements of this burn and ensures safety first and foremost. Non-sanctioned events are not guided by any particular policies, don't need to have safety teams working, and generally leave behind piles of garbage, have no sound policies in effect, and typically leave spaces worse off than when they were found. Our event has a dedicated Leave No Trace team who stays 2 days after participants are gone and GPS traces a precise grid system of our event to ensure every last piece of forgotten string or button or tent peg is removed. In 2018, during setup, a theme camp discovered a 3-foot piece of rebar buried in the ground at 83 Doyle Road and spent over 2 hours removing it, to a roaring applause of our participants. Our Leave No Trace ethos runs deep, and we often take this initiative to our local areas to do beach and park cleanups year-round. Participants follow a pack it in, pack it out policy, and this includes any gray water. Nothing is permitted to hit the ground, and participants risk not being invited back if they do not follow our strict guidelines. This May, we'll have seen 4 years go by since our community has gathered. Our community extends all over Ontario and Quebec, and during this hiatus, it has been difficult to not be able to gather as one. Most of us have been gathering for decades every year. While there have been efforts to get people together, our annual reunion is deeply missed, and our community has come alive again with a possibility and invitation to host our event this year. In 2022, when we had to cancel due to fire bans, we temporarily moved our event date from May to August, hoping to better accommodate COVID safety. We were pretty devastated. A lot of planning and personal funds go into these events, and despite our best efforts, it was just poor timing. We love the May long weekend for our event as it best supports our plans for fire safety, does not risk things like heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and despite the bugs joining us for our celebrations and possible rain, we find it's the best timing for our specific needs. We have been lucky enough to forge lasting relationships with local townspeople, including McCormick's Camden East, who we purchase our ice, supplies, and early crew pizza off of. In 2018, they changed their display sign out front to say, "Welcome Hyperborea." And that little note hit us very deeply. As well, the community center in Stone Mills had a welcome burners sign out front. We were feeling very welcome and secure that our legacy would be one of cohesion, community, and mutual respect. In past years, we have delivered notes to all nearby neighbors, local businesses, and been in touch with local fire, police, and EMS, as well as traffic services, to notify them of our event. We aim to be good guests in your town and take very seriously the impression we leave behind. One of our biggest hurdles to date is receiving verbal and written confirmation of the intent to permit our event ahead of our timeline for ticket sales and organization. We are on track to start releasing ticket sales mid-March and have already received art grant and theme camp applications. Due to the logistics involved, we have to carry through our timeline of organization, even if we come up against a roadblock at the very end, as seen in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID, and 2022 due to fire bans. We have released our website, sideburn.ca, which has all of our information in depth for review. I would like to walk you quickly through a small slideshow presentation to help better visualize who we are about. And I thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have. So the slideshow itself didn't work out, but this is just a quick sort of photo tour of who we are and what we do. So what is Sideburn? Oh, thank you, sure. So we're a sanctioned regional Burning Man event. We're run by a volunteer board of 12, so we're a registered nonprofit organization. All of the event organizers are board members. We have a healthy, long-standing incorporated nonprofit behind the event. So when we made the name change from Hyperborea to Sideburn, we made all the changes with ministry and really just renamed and restructured. The event has 2 burn nights, one for the effigy and one for the temple, 2 unique art pieces built out of wood. Just as a side note, the temple is non-denominational. It's just a place for people to come and reflect. We encourage them to write on. And in this photo, you can see somebody has left a note. You're right where you're supposed to be. And somebody else wrote a note. Thank you, I needed that. We offer the opportunity for participants to come and unplug and camp for 4 days in Stone Mills. So these are the 10 principles we discussed a little bit, and I'm happy to expand on any of those if you have any questions. Very quickly, radical inclusion means we welcome the stranger. You don't have to be a burner or know anything about it. You're welcome to come so long as you follow the rules and policies that we have in place. There's no money exchange, so we're gifting. Gift could be a cup of coffee or your time. It's not even a barter situation. You just give something without expecting anything in return. Decommodification is a really nice one. When we're all, in our daily lives sort of worried about money and exchange, it's really nice to come to a place where you don't have to worry about that at all. Self-reliance just means bring all your stuff and count on yourself so others don't have to help you through your weekend. Radical self-expression doesn't have to be so big. For me, it means, wearing a tutu in the field. It can be silly. We encourage it to be silly. We encourage people to express who they are, and we support that. Civic communal effort means a whole bunch of us put this together. There are over 500 volunteer spots within our event. Everybody is required to sign up for at least 1 shift to make this event a success. Civic responsibility is us abiding by all federal, provincial, and municipal laws and bylaws. Leave no trace, we've discussed. Participation, this is a no spectator event, so people don't just come to watch what happens, they come to be part of what happens. And immediacy, we encourage folks to leave any preconceived notions at the gate, come in. If there's something you would like to experience, just try it. If it's right there in front of you, no, everybody's going to support. The theme for this year is portals. That was submitted by our community and voted on by our community, and has a lot of significance as we sort of move into this, not necessarily post-COVID world, but like after what the heck just happened these past few years, moving into what's next. This piece here is called Tarna, the Jackalope. This was born at Hyperborea/Sideburn and was funded to make it out to Burning Man, where it made its first appearance. So we don't leave anything behind. There are no garbage bins. Participants bring in their garbage, they bring out their garbage. We call garbage a matter out of place, or MOOP, because it's fun that way. And we make sure there's no lasting damage to the land. That's very important to us, as we understand at 83 Doyle Road, there might be some consideration for future use of the land, so we take great care to return it how we received it. The 2 big burns are the temple and the effigy. They're built on site as part of the event. This year, we're able to give $5,000 to each of these build crews for a grand total of about $25,000 of art grants that we'd like to give out. We're a break-even event. Whatever comes in through ticket sales, we give out through art grants, and we keep a little bit for our storage unit, our lawyer, our accountant, and all of that stuff that we need to deal with throughout the year. On Saturday is when the effigy is burned. It's a celebration of the event. On Sunday, it's a much different mood. At Burning Man with 80,000 participants, the night the temple is burned, you can hear a pin drop. It's quite eerie. This was our temple in 2019. Theme camps are the heart and the soul of the event. The event doesn't have any paid-for programming, art projects, theme camps, and our participants are what make the event magical. Theme camps are groups of friends that decided the event would be much better with a particular offering or program. For example, in this photo, this group offered to bring a lounge for its participants. This is out in the middle of the hayfield. Our art grant program is intended to support and foster the participatory spirit of the core of the event. We provide funding for expressive, community-based, interactive, experimental, and cross-disciplinary projects that help define the creative atmosphere we strive to curate. We provide up to $25,000 in art grants to Canadian artists and creators every year. Community involvement and contributions are important to us. As part of our presence in Stone Mills in 2023, we would like to make a donation each to your skate park initiative and your volunteer fire department. Helping you be safe, this is geared towards our participants. We have volunteer trained safety teams, which also includes firefighters, paramedics, and nurses. And we run what's called a sanctuary. We have rangers, and we have quite a robust first aid team. Here's the welcome burner sign I mentioned earlier. We really want to be good neighbors. I'm from a small town, despite living in Toronto for the past 26 years, and I'm actually from a place called Precious Corners, where the population is about 400. So I understand how much of an impact and how different and how strange this can seem to people living in small towns. It's quite a big event if you've never seen anything like this before. We require our participants to follow critical policies around sound, garbage, fire safety, and more. And each year that we come into the host town, we spend about $10,000 to $15,000 locally. So we make sure that anything we need to buy, we buy it here. And we do make regular donations to sports teams, community organizations, and we have a pretty good track record of that, both within Tamworth and Stone Mills. This is one of the art projects we funded. There were 2 of these telephone booths, one at each end of the field. When you picked up the phone in one end, it rang in the other, and you could have a random conversation with a stranger. This is some of our fire performers. They perform during the effigy burn at Burning Man. This is quite a position, it's very difficult to get into. Toronto boasts hundreds of these fire performers, and we like to display their art at our event. This is Heavy Meta. This is a fire-breathing dragon. Also firstborn at our very first Hyperborea in 2017. And has since made it out to Burning Man every year since. So we were able to give quite a substantial funding grant for their first year, and we have what's called a legacy grant. So each year these projects come back, we give them more money to make sure that they can continue on. This is a bus stop. This was built by our 10-year-old participant, Raiden, who has been to Burning Man more times than most of our participants with his mom. He's enthusiastic about getting people to connect. So he created this bus stop suitable for only 2 people to encourage people to go inside and connect, just talk. Raiden got $400 for this art grant to produce this. Just a variety of other performances. A lot of our groups and participants come out of Montreal. This is a group called Robot Tarts. They bring a full-sized oven and they make tarts. And here is us gathering around one of our burns. And we hope to see you May 18th to 22nd. Permits provided at Sideburn Portals. I thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Yes, go ahead, Wendy.
Do you have any disturbances at all at any of these events? And if so, how might you handle them? How might you handle them?
Thank you for your question. It's a good one. We've been very lucky to have a security team that's been working for our event for many years, and a lot of events like this. Throughout the event, we have an average of 12 to 20 sober radioed personnel, and that ranges from EMS services, so nurses, paramedics, to what we call rangers, who are people who are trained in mediation. So rangers don't care about the stuff at the event, they care about the people. And they're trained to help mediate disputes between camp members. They're trained to deal with noise complaints as they come in, if people just randomly show up at our gate. So we're a gated, ticketed wristband event. So anybody showing up at the gate isn't allowed entry. And we have about a 6-inch safety binder that goes through every single possible outcome. We train year round to deal with every outcome. And with the FEMA ICS training, we sort of run through scenarios that often come up and both don't come up. We don't want them to come up, but we're prepared for that when it happens.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I just, is there a liquor license at these events? And what the safety and charge is fine, but are people allowed to have spirits?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, we're actually, so in past, we haven't been required to have a liquor license because we don't sell alcohol. There's this gray area with this type of event, and we've confused a lot of people because we don't sell alcohol, we don't offer anything. It's quite new to a lot, and we've gone through the LCBO, we've gone through, I forget the acronym that they use, but like the overall sort of liquor board. And essentially because we don't sell liquor, there are no bars. We do wristband minors because within camps, it's not unlike sort of provincial park camping. If you go with your group, you might bring alcohol to consume in your site. We have a no glass policy, so people can't bring any glass onto the site. And we encourage any drinking or anything like that to happen within the camp. So at this point, and I mean, if anybody can help us navigate this too, so far as we know, because we haven't been required to provide a liquor license for this event, though we do want to make sure we're crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, we don't currently hold a liquor license.
Yes, Rob, go ahead.
Through you, John. Just in regards to operation within campgrounds when it comes to liquor, because it's a temporary residence, that's how you're allowed to have alcohol on there. But if you were to step off of your campsite onto one of the roadways or onto another person's site beside you, unless they give you permission to do so, you're no longer on your temporary residence. Same as people inquire about, can you have alcohol on a boat? And there's certain requirements that makes it a residence under anchor and so on. So that's where you're going to run into that. Now, are people assigned a certain space that they're going to camp in? Okay, so there's their temporary residence. So as long as they get permission when they move to somebody else's temporary residence to be there, you should be clear as far as I know.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's exactly what we've come up against, or what we've come across when doing, when looking into this is exactly that, because it's your within your tent or within your camp, and it's why we have registered theme camps. So we. I brought maps from previous years if anybody's interested in looking at them, but we have a very specific city layout. So for instance, my camp is called God Camp. It's called the Good Old Days. We're a bunch of older burners who don't like the music that is often complained about. So we play sort of classic rock, not with a subwoofer. So God Camp is my home for the time that I'm there. And that's the only place, if I have a chance to have a drink, that's where I have it.
Yes, in regards to that, I see your site plan here. I was looking at that earlier, and it's nicely laid out. You did a good job on it. By the way, thank you for coming for all this. I didn't realize you came from so far. This is really well done. It's nice to see organizations getting things together and committing to something that brings people, community together one way or another. And it looks like you've got the camping and the burn sites all at I'm assuming the north end of this map, but there's no compass on it. That's fine. But the parking and camping area is combined. So that's interesting. So you can park with your vehicle next to you. Is that how that is?
So we're currently, we have more sort of robust, if you'd like to see, this is 2018 and 19 maps. And those are those are the finalized maps. So this is what participants receive. And this is our working map. So we go through about 28 versions. Thankfully, we have somebody on our team who loves to do maps. This is far beyond my skill set. But what we do is when theme camps register, we ask them how many participants, what their sort of theme is about, and we place camps accordingly. So we're very, very careful not to place music camps beside Kidsville. Like we have Kidsville sort of has its own area. It's very safe and it's up by what we call the hub, which is Rangers Sanctuary first aid and fire safety. So, you know, when we have it sort of laid out like that, our intention with this map is because we have the additional space this time, which we've been lucky enough to walk the land this year. So up at the top of this, thank you for scrolling, is where we intend to have the 2 burn sites. So the benefit of this is that it's set much farther back from Highway 4, which was visible to local folks and sort of like, what the heck is this fire happening? So this is much better for us. It takes the fire or the distraction away from the event a little further from the people who live on Highway 4, which we're in touch with. We try to give them a heads up. Once participants enter the event, they park their car. They can't drive it at all. So this is a walking around event. Or, you know, if people want to bring bicycles, they can bike around. Because we host our event in May, we're often up against some soggy weather. And so with the addition of this, which is actually quite an understatement, but with the addition of this land, what it allows us is more room to park the cars, keep everything off Doyle Road, keep emergency roads open and accessible, and we tend to keep the tents actually away from the cars. So we've put camping and parking kind of clumped there, but one will be for one and one will be for the other.
Wenda.
In the past, sound was an issue, but you had mentioned that at the last event that there were no sound complaints. By changing the burn sites, the 2 burn sites, are you anticipating that there might be or may be less of a sound issue? Because I know there are people that live on the back end of Doyle Road that are their farms butt up against the very back end of it. So how do you envision these changed burn sites being impacted by sound?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, we've actually been requesting the larger space. So originally, you know, we wanted to enter into like a 5-year plan with Stone Mills. We're now understanding that because something might be happening with this land, you know, sort of differently than hosting the events, we understand that it might be a year-by-year basis. So originally, we were really looking forward to this land for a couple of reasons, because it's higher. So when it rains in May, we're less likely to get the flooding that we've experienced in the lower lands in the front part of the property. We have, part of our volunteer team are actually sound engineers. And what we do is we come up pre-event, and that can happen sort of on any weekend once we get permission to come up and start sort of doing these tests. And we have sound decibel meters and we have sound readings. One volunteer position during the event is to actually drive within 1 kilometer of the event and continuously take sound readings. The difference between 2018, where we had some sound complaints, we accidentally bounced all of the sound off the lake that backs onto that property, and that was a mess. And we learned a lot and we got a lot of feedback. And in 2019, it really is quite a science of aiming sound in such a way that it just stays in one area. Again, well beyond my knowledge of these things. But we have sound limits as well. So depending on the day of the event, typically Friday and Saturday are the days when sound is allowed to go up to 100 decibels. And that's only until it's local laws. So whatever the local noise laws are is what we follow. We don't anticipate having a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one, where it indicates burn site 3, which is actually probably not going to be used as a burn site because it's so closed off and difficult for an emergency team to get to should there be an emergency. We've decided to actually make that little, what we're calling the dog ear staff camp. It's very quiet and private, but that is actually behind the dump, which serves us very well in terms of how we can aim sound. And the sound actually doesn't come from the burn sites. The sound comes from the theme camps. So we have a couple of camps that register as sound camps. The art pieces that you saw, Heavy Meta and Tarna, amplify sound like nobody's business. At Burning Man, it's wide open. It can be as loud, and it's awful. In my opinion, it's too noisy. But those camps we intend on bringing a little bit closer and aiming in the direction of, I believe, northeast, which there are no houses for several kilometers in that direction. As well, we we physically go to each house to let them know that this is happening. We have pretty good relationships with the closest neighbors. There are some that just don't want this to happen, and that's understandable. It's kind of a nuisance if this is not what you're used to on the May long weekend. But our sound team is specifically trained and invested in making sure that we aim the sound in the direction with the least, the least amount of disturbance. Thank you.
Anyone else? Could I ask staff if they have any concerns, and if not, what sort of stage are we at in terms of application, and what sort of permit is required for this event?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, well, if there's any concerns, I mean, we've been through this before, so I'm assuming your concerns have been met in terms of fire, in terms of traffic, and so on and so forth. If you do have any concerns that are currently unresolved, let us know. Otherwise, just for the information of council and the public, what is the permit process? Is this a special event permit? And what is required from the standpoint of staff that perhaps Sarah hasn't touched on yet?
So through you, Reed-Wise, we have met with the applicant 2 or 3 weeks ago on site, walked the site, kind of come up with the best alternative for the burn sites, emergency route accessing. Everything was met that way. We haven't received all the permit package yet, per se, but that's coming soon, I believe.
I'll just jump in on that. With respect to the permitting process, Deputy or Reeve-Wise, yes, special events permits are required for this event. This is on municipal owned lands. Zoning doesn't contemplate this type of use. Again, it's a temporary use that we would allow as a municipality to occur on a temporary basis through special events permitting, which is ultimately approved by council. We have had conversation as Public Works Manager Thompson has alluded to with the applicant and understanding the best locations. And that's why I think we've got the plan in front of us today, and we're continuing to work through that with minor revisions, as you've heard from the proponent. There's also an incorporation of an agreement, and an agreement is important in this type of situation, given liabilities, insurances that Sarah and her team have mentioned. That's all secured on their end with their legal team, and we ought to do that due diligence on our end too. So we, just from a processing perspective, should we proceed forward with this, staff would continue to work with Sarah's legal team and our legal team in understanding what the nuances of the agreement would be in advance to council for ultimate approval on the special event permit.
Oh, thanks, Jason and Jeff. Anything else from council? So what do you need in terms of a motion here, Brian, besides receiving Sarah's presentation?
Your Worship, I believe earlier this evening, Sarah had indicated her request for an intent to issue the permit, if I believe the terminology was correct.
That's right. We understand, just based on the event license and permitting that we've received in past, that you can't actually issue the permit until I believe it's like 30 days before the event itself. So what we're looking for is the intent to issue the permit so that we can go forward with selling tickets and purchasing things that we need for our event.
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
In that case, Your Worship, recommended the council approve the delegation. There would be a secondary portion of that further council confirm their intent to provide a special events permit for Sideburn 2023 on 83 Doyle Road as soon as the special event permits, as well as a land use agreement, are approved. So there is a secondary requirement in 2023 that has not been there in the past because the land has been under a sublease, that we'll have to have a land use agreement as well in addition to the agreement.
Is anyone willing to make that motion? Rob, do I have a seconder? Krista Lee, any further discussion? I will say one thing. I am delighted that you're coming back. I know it's not entirely without certain frictions with certain neighbors. I hope that the sound issue will be further refined. I have to say one thing. It's the burning. In these times, burning anything from a climate change standpoint, and I know this will have like minimal impact, but the symbolism, I wish Burning Man would come up with some other way to celebrate instead of burning stuff. Just, that's my 2 cents on that one. Otherwise, I'm perfectly in favor in this, and I will call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, bylaws and resolutions. Stone Mills 2023 municipal budget bylaw to establish tax rate for the year. We have a recommended motion that bylaw 2023 hasn't been numbered yet, being a bylaw to establish a municipal budget and tax rates for 2023 calendar year be read a first time and number assigned on February 21st, 2023. We've all been through the budget process. We have a draft bylaw and schedule. Any discussion? Can I get a mover for that? Motions? Sherry and Wenda. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Financial accounts. We don't have any tonight, do we, Christina? I'm just reading words on a page here. Staff reports. Manager of Development Services, Sands. We don't have anything from him or Finance Manager Beauchamp. CAO Clerk Brooks. We've got a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council meeting referred to as the procedural bylaw. Brian and a subcommittee have been working on this. We had the 2014 one ahead of our last meeting, which I'm sure you've all read in detail. And now we have the revised version. And I would open up the floor to discussion. Any comments or questions about the new procedural bylaw? Yes. Mr. Lee, go ahead.
I just want to comment on 9.2 that the live streams will be left up until the minutes are passed at the next meeting. That makes me happy because 24 hours is not much time to give people with varied schedules and many responsibilities to see it. So I really like that change.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Anyone else? I have several questions. Could we just clarify that time for the video to go up? Is it a week, Brian? Once the minutes are published, just clarify that for me.
So, Your Worship, the intent is that it would not, the video would remain up until the minutes are received. We would take it down at 12 o'clock. So in this case, any minutes that were approved this evening would be taken down at 12 o'clock tomorrow, as essentially the minutes have been endorsed this evening, with the condition that they would have to remain up for at least 1 week. So in the case that we have a special meeting called, say, last Thursday, and we approve the minutes this evening, it would stay up until at least Thursday. And then I suspect the expectation was the noon following that day, then we would remove them from the public streaming process. Our intent is not to remove them in a quick process, is just to have the timing and the schedule so that we know when they come down based on the procedural bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Section 11, reconsideration. The first one there, only a member who voted on the prevailing side of an original decision may bring forward a motion for reconsideration. If there hadn't been a recorded vote, how do we determine who was on the prevailing side? Is it just sort of the honor system or rely all on our mutual memory, or how does that work, Brian?
That's exactly it, Your Worship. In fact, the reason that that's in there is to demonstrate that there has been a change in the position. Essentially, if individuals that were on the opposing side essentially brought it back, there's no guarantee that there would be any change for the consideration. So the important part is the individual that was a proponent, and that's essentially to be, I guess, self-policed is the answer by the members at this table. If it's a hot topic or something of consideration, then you may be asked to rule on something if one council member does not agree that they were on the prevailing side of the vote.
Okay, thank you. So we get to section 12, which is rules of debate, versus section 13, which is modified rules of debate. And I'm not sure when we use one, the more formal one, which is 12, and when we use 13, which is the modified, slightly more flexible, informal one. How do we determine under which rules we're generally operating?
So typically your modified rules of debate are shared for committee of the whole. So if council wishes to have a single topic agenda item, wishes to have general discussion to come together with a plan that's of public nature, then you essentially can verbalize and state your intentions to the committee or to council that you intend to utilize the modified rule, which essentially opens up the floor into a more casual conversation piece. This was heavily spoke about, if you recall, the councillor training session, where casual conversation is often the key to good collaboration. And this just allows for that opportunity. Revise, we've talked about this in the past, that often discussion between members start to ensue. If you ever feel that way, you can essentially ask council to adopt the modified rules of debate. And as long as there's no objection to do, then it essentially opens the floor for a more casual atmosphere, should that be the intentions of council. Typically, this is for more of a special meeting of council, something that may be consideration, i.e. if we were meeting to discuss what was going on at the roads building and how we might repair that building, it just opens up more room for discussion rather than speaking once, waiting for everybody to go, then speaking twice, and being a very formal where someone may have more experience or more to comment in one area, and it just gives them that ability outside of procedure, which is normally operated, to do so.
Okay, that clears that up for me. 12.3, any member who is not disqualified from voting by any act may request that a recorded vote be taken prior to or immediately subsequent to taking a vote. So does that mean we could have our usual show of hands vote, and then someone can ask for a recorded vote even after the motion has been passed by a show of hands?
To the members that were sitting on the review panel, that's specifically what they want as part of that. Sometimes there's lots of discussion. The discussion that was held at the review committee is that people aren't necessarily aware. They have lots of discussion, there's good communication, but they don't necessarily know what the result will be. And so they want that right that subsequently thereafter, they could have it recorded as a recorded vote in case they wanted to bring it back for reconsideration, or in case they wanted the position of council to be known individually. So it was specifically discussed, likely at length, by the review panel, and it was desired to have that option shortly thereafter. But essentially, once you moved to the next topic, that opportunity has gone away.
Yes, thank you. That clarifies that. 12.7. I made these notes yesterday, so I'm sorry. I'm sort of wondering what the heck I meant by my question. 12.7 is fairly lengthy. One of the questions I had here was, does the chair seek a motion on a staff recommendation before opening discussion? In other words, do we want to start each item having a mover and seconder, then we discuss? Is that the implication of this? And that's fine with me if that's the intent.
That is the intent, that there should be a mover and seconder before discussion ensues. I would suggest to you that practically how it's operated at this table is not necessarily always that way, which is acceptable until it's not. Once it's challenged by procedure or challenged by a council member, that's when we have a difficulty. I would encourage council, Reeve-wise specifically, to lay out those expectations verbally at times when you see that conversation and that branching from procedure, to ensure that all are comfortable with that. But technical term, you should have a mover and seconder before discussion ensues, as it should remain on topic to that point. And then if motion's accepted or defeated, then a second motion comes up, is then discussed, and so on and so forth until the matter is dealt with.
So just for council's understanding then, you don't even necessarily have to be in support of a motion or recommendation or a staff recommendation to make the motion to initiate discussion. Is that correct?
That is absolutely 100% correct. There's been numerous circumstances where committee members in the past have brought something forward on behalf of the committee and then voted against it. There is not an obligation because you've put the resolution forward to support it. Essentially, you're putting that motion forward so that a decision of council can be made. Sometimes, admittedly, it can be political in the sense that we tried to get support. I'm not for it, but we had tried to get support and it was defeated. I told you I was against it and I voted as such, and we couldn't get the motion passed. But what we did get passed was whatever comes second. So there is no obligation to support the motion. That's why it speaks to reconsideration of the prevailing or the opposing side of the vote.
Right. So I'm going to be asking then if there's particularly a staff recommendation for someone to make the recommendation to open discussion. Go ahead, Wendy.
I'll make the motion that we accept the procedural bylaw as revised.
Great. And Sherry is seconding that. Any further discussion? You just want me to shut up. You don't have to be so obedient, Wendy. And I still have more questions. Okay. Let me see. In section, let's see, I've got 12.8 here. A member may speak a second time to question upon concurrence of members present, but only if the question has not yet been put to a vote. And the member shall be permitted an additional 3 minutes, etc. So what was my question here? Was, oh yes, so a second comment can only be on the concurrence of other members. Okay, that's fine.
Essentially, Your Worship, that's based on the principle that all members at the table should be given an opportunity to speak to the matter
Right.
once before a member goes second. So
Right.
it should not be Councillor Milligan talking back with Councillor Woodcock and vice versa. It should be, the discussion should be forwarded to you as the chair of the meeting, keeps everything neutral, and then there can be further conversation once everybody's had an opportunity and further opportunity for second rounds or third or fourth or however many are desired, are supported by council and by the chair.
Great. That addresses any questions I have, and I'm going to try to be keeping these things in mind because I've generally been a little bit less formal, and I will count on council, particularly the members who discussed the procedural bylaw, to keep me on track. So if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Yes, Crystal Lee, go ahead.
I'm just rethinking 9.2, just when the example cited is if we have a special meeting on a Thursday, it will stay till the next, and we pass the minutes on a Monday, then we'll take it off at noon on Thursday. Why not leave it 2 weeks? Only in that when you have a special meeting, like the public doesn't really know when those are going to happen in advance. Regular council meetings are pretty calendar, right? So you know when to see it, you can make time, but things like a special meeting, it gives people, it's a little harder to be informed and to be able to get that knowledge. And I spoke with a lot of people at Roma who did say they just leave their videos up indefinitely. And I know that may not be what people want to hear, but maybe 2 weeks rather than one, especially in the occurrence of something like a special meeting. Just, I don't know how other people might feel about that, but.
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
Your Worship, just to give you some context and for the people that were doing the in-person review, I think the intent was that as soon as the minutes are adopted, essentially that becomes the public record of the meeting. And so in a time where the minutes are not adopted and there may be questions, there may be a request from a member of the public to complete a delegation, prior to the next council meeting in response to that item. That 2-week period typically between council meetings is the time between action and adopting the minutes that makes that official record. In a special meeting circumstance, it's highly unlikely, not impossible, that we're having a meeting last week and I've got the minutes ready for Monday night, unless there's something that has to be acted upon that I have to have those done. I can demonstrate that by showing you that our special meetings of January 31st in the budget and February 13th of the second budget are just coming to you on February 21st. So although February 13th is a perfect example, we're going to receive that on the 21st. Tomorrow, those meetings essentially can be taken down because the official record, the actual minutes are able to be published, and therefore the information of that meeting could exist. The timeline to us is relatively irrelevant. It's really at the discretion of council. We just want to comply with whatever's in that procedural bylaw.
Go ahead.
Just to add, so if it generally takes a little more time anyway for some minutes, why not just make it 2 weeks? And then it's 2 weeks. Just for that little additional time, I've heard from quite a few people who would like meetings up longer. Some people have said at least a week. Some people have said, why not forever if we've been already, invested in the technology. But I think 2 weeks is it's just a little more than one.
We have a motion on the floor, and unless you're making a motion to that effect, Crystal Lee, which you can't do because there's a motion on the floor, I'm going to call the question unless anyone wants to discuss this particular issue at this point. That's right, and only Wenda and Rob can actually do that. You're perfectly free to seek an amendment to the procedural bylaw to that effect subsequent to this vote. Wenda, go ahead.
It sounds perfectly simple to make all of them 2 weeks. So I'm happy to revise my motion to say 2 weeks with the exception of 9.2. We would revise that to 2 weeks. So all meetings, all minutes, or all meetings would be brought down at the end of 2 weeks. I'm happy to do that.
The original mover
Rob has
was,
I was the mover.
you were the
so
mover,
Rob's the
Rob was a seconder. Seconder, comment, please.
In regards to the summer, when we have meetings once a month, we would actually be shortening people's view time up by 2 weeks. Now, regardless, it doesn't matter to me either way, but I do agree with the fact that the minutes becoming official record should just be the mark. Then it's logical, then it has a purpose and a procedure. But I mean, I'm okay with 2 weeks too. I understand why we did just the minutes become official record and then the other serves almost no purpose, becomes null and void. That was my thought originally.
One more.
I would say it's not just for 2 weeks, but the minutes or at a minimum of 2 weeks rather than a minimum of one. So not making it less in the summer. And I get that the minutes are, public record, but that doesn't tell people how we got to decisions that we had. It's like you could look at a verdict or you could read a judge's decision, which will actually give you a lot of details about how you got to that answer. And one is really kind of rich with information and one doesn't really reveal much.
Okay, so you're basically revising your motion for 2 weeks. Sorry, Wenda. Sorry, Crystal Lee. You're speaking so passionately. I'm assuming you're the mover. So Wenda, you're fine with 2 weeks. Rob, you're happy one way or the other. So that's a modified motion then, Brian? And any further discussion on this motion, which changes the bylaw slightly to a 2 week rather than a 1 week period? I have no preference either way. Wendy and Sherry, then you're okay? I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Number 2 under this. Yes, Wenda.
As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I have to leave.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're excused. Thanks, Wenda. And now you have to do a full shift? Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, number 2 under this section is municipal vehicle use policy. Brian, did you want to speak to this further than the information we have here?
Yes, Your Worship, as part of budget process, there was a request brought forward to council seeking endorsement for a municipal use policy. I'm trying to pull it up. Essentially, I have attempted to provide a draft as to when and how this policy would be applied. It's based on 4 principles: the frequency, the amount of times that the individual may be required to perform work function after hours or respond to emergency circumstances. Second one is the urgency. So in the case where it saves time or saves life, property, matter, etc. Specifically, our fire department or our roads in the event of an accident, if they're expected to respond to those. Scheduled standby, which essentially speaks to the individuals that are on standby for winter patrol, where they can essentially leave their residence, start their work to minimize the amount of time that they're required to commit after hours. And the last one is if there's any specialized tools or equipment as required to perform their position. So I attempted to make this as stone mills based as we could, ensuring that there's a requirement to validate and justify why any individual would have a municipal vehicle on their property, ensure that the intent is to remain inside the township, and to ensure that it's not used for personal use, that it's not abused, and that it's basically in the interest of the municipality to demonstrate this. If there's something up for discussion, I would be happy to answer any questions.
So other than a motion to receive, you're not looking for approval of this at this point, you want some input. So can I get a motion to receive this
I
report?
actually want it endorsed if we can get it.
You want it endorsed?
Unless there's a reason, your worship, that
Okay.
it shouldn't be. We're looking for endorsement as we believe it's the principles that we operate from already in some positions, but it's just applying those to anybody of the position supervisor or above that may meet these same thresholds.
Okay, I'm looking for that motion. Sherry and Crystal Lee, any discussion? I think it's quite, yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
I just wonder if, I'm thinking of insurance purposes. If people have a vehicle and they have it in their home and they're using it on a regular basis. I wondered in regards to employees notifying people, their managers, about prescription changes, does that just fall under the drugs administration policy you probably have? But if somebody's using a vehicle, I don't see that in here, but maybe there's another policy that's going to be line by line by line, stating mainly to make sure that if someone is on a certain prescription that could impair their ability and safety to operate the vehicle, that's an insurance thing if they ever got in an accident. And I guess that was mainly it. If they're going, I'm sure if there's any vehicle problems, they would report them. But, and the other thing is the number of people that might have a vehicle, the rank, you mentioned the position above the rank of supervisor. Should we be putting that into who those ranks are, or is it the scope, all the people just above the supervisor, or should be putting job descriptions in there? I hope that was a little
Yeah,
bit.
go ahead, Brian.
So speaking through the first thing with regards to the requirement to disclose any personal prescriptions, etc., we actually can't ask for that information as it's medical privilege. As far as now, we can ask them if there's signs of impairment. We can certainly go through our procedures to ensure whether they are impaired or otherwise. But I think what the basis of is to ensure that they're not impaired at the time of operation. And I would suggest that that's not something that's required to be written into this policy, as it's a contravention of the rules of the road, so to speak. And they would actually be contradicting provincial requirements, and therefore would be subject to penalty under the Highway Traffic Act. So I'm not sure that we write provincial requirement, like as far as being impaired by drug or alcohol or any substance. We can't give an exemption to that. It's not in our jurisdiction. It's implied and enforced by provincial legislation. I think that we are. I don't think that we're able to ask for individuals to declare what medications they're on, as that's doctor individual privilege.
I just, from my experiences, we when we had volunteers drive our vehicles, they had to submit a good health record. We didn't know what prescriptions they were on. They were just signing, stating that, and we used it for insurance purposes. It was just a form that they signed stating that because most of our volunteers were over 80. So we wanted to make sure that, they agreed. And sometimes we had a doctor sign for them. It's just a precaution that some people, are on medications and then their medications gets changed and they may get a little wonky and they're not even realizing it. So I didn't know how you might want to handle that, but that's how we've handled it, or I have handled it in the past. So it's just food for thought for insurance purposes.
Okay.
So, Your Worship,
Yeah, go ahead,
just
Brian.
addressing the other item. As far as frequency, urgency, scheduled standby tools or equipment, that's why it's not listed technically as supervisor or above, because right now, the only principles from a position perspective that would apply to is that and above. But there may be one-off circumstances where it could apply to staff. Somebody's going to training or somebody's filling in for, I use the example looking across at our CBO. If our CBO is off and a building inspector is performing his tasks, then it may be reasonable for him to take a vehicle home to start with an inspection in the morning to try to save time and travel, et cetera. So it's not specifically exclusive. It's just intended that that's who it will apply to. And then there's discretionary ability throughout that policy that a manager or a CAO could sign off on additional use if it was necessary. Most uses are going to be our fire chief, our deputy fire chief, our road supervisor, our deputy, or our fire chief. And then, occasionally, which I doubt has occurred with our CBO or our arena supervisor, they're essentially the only ones. There have been circumstances where an individual's been without a vehicle in the sense that they were in an accident during our time and needed 2 days to get their lives sorted out, and we've permitted it just to go home back and forth to work as an accommodation measure. But that's certainly a last case scenario.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, number 3 is municipal telework flex work policy agreement and checklist. And we have a recommended motion that council approve and implement the telework flex work policy agreement template and alternate site safety checklist as presented. Is someone willing to put that on the floor? Krista Lee moves, Sherry seconds. Any discussion? Brian, did you want to elaborate at all on this one?
I think this policy covers what was discussed through budgetary process at the request from managers and supervisors inside the municipality. We've attempted to address when this would be reasonable, under what circumstances, and for the duration that it would be permitted. It is important to notice the creation of this policy is that home offices or alternate work locations are also subject to the same WSIB requirements and inspection and resources that an in-office does. So prior to anybody signing into an agreement to work from home, our Health and Safety Committee would have to do an on-site location just to make sure that it's suitable in the form of ergonomics and access and emergency, and that it's a suitable working place to work from.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that detail. It's quite an exhaustive checklist. Yeah. Any discussion? Yeah, Wendy.
I have a question in regards to communication. So might consider putting how long a staff should reply to you when you're in an environment and you can go to a staff person that's in the other office. And then if you put out a request for something and you haven't heard from a staff person in a couple hours, you might wonder where they are. So that was just a thought. I think, and I guess the only question I had is, again, in the scope, it mentioned any staff, once they've done 3-month probation, once they're over their 3-month probation period. That seems like a lot of staff people that could possibly have 1 day to work at home. would it be feasible to maybe look at that and say, again, announce the staff that right now, maybe the managers? That's a thought. Maybe.
So the fear with that is we attempt really hard to ensure that our supervisors and managers aren't getting benefits that staff are not. I think the simplest answer to that is it's a test, and we must meet the test as far as can you do tomorrow's workload to 100% capacity without compromising the work that's required. If the answer to this is yes, and I look across at Jason with much respect, and his eyes kind of squinted when you asked for a request within 2 hours, because we don't get that in our office. The reality is we really don't. And so the intent of it being 1 day per week, this is meant to be a mechanism where I am purposely making it so that you don't expect to hear from me tomorrow because I need to do this. And so while I appreciate that there may be something we need, we all have cell phones, which if somebody's, having lunch or something else, we still know that they're going to have their cell phone. I would look to my fellow colleagues and say, I don't believe that it's an issue for a response. And if there is, there's a really good reason for it. Worst case scenario is I know that I have you tomorrow morning if you're absent today. Typically, I look across and nobody really wants to work from home. But it may be a necessary evil to block themselves off from whatever it is that might cause disruption in the office. So while I appreciate that if it was my manager and I couldn't get a hold of a staff member, I think before they go home, it's an expectation that the manager and or myself is aware of what that person will be doing tomorrow, and the requirement for communication should be able to be mitigated at least in a day, or there should be other resources that can assist you in the office. I would ask others maybe if they see that differently, but I don't see it being an issue as far as communication because we have depth at positions. And if Jason can't answer it, I hope I can, or Cindy can, or we just hope that we're never dependent on one person.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item D, Manager of Public Works and Emergency Services Thompson, land disposition to Lennox and Annigan County to accommodate community infrastructure improvements. This is regarding the intersection in Camden East, and the recommended motion is that council authorize the REEV and CAO to execute the land disposition agreement with LNA County for community infrastructure upgrades as presented. Can I get a mover and seconder to open the floor? Sherry and Rob. Jeff, anything to add to your report or just to clarify?
Thank you. Revise, nothing to add to the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jeff? When is this supposed to commence, Jeff? That may be in there, but I've just forgotten.
The land acquisition, all the work itself, it hasn't been tendered yet. So
Okay.
the schedule will come out once
We don't know.
once we know who gets awarded.
Do we need the money? Yeah. Do we need the money, Brian says.
Do we actually? My question is, and I had this conversation with the roads manager, for the sake of $1,400, which is a transfer to LNA County versus us, is the amount material enough to request? I guess I come back to the one taxpayer comment where it's not a material amount. I leave that for council's consideration. To me, it seemed petty. My first read was that we were paying $1,400, and I thought it was extremely petty, and that's where my mindset went. I'm not in the business of trying to throw away money. That's not it. I just see this as being almost a minute. It's for the community interest in the sense that it's sidewalk area. I just ask council for that consideration.
Any discussion in regard to the $1,400 fee? Yes, Sherry.
Would I need to change the motion?
Just amend your motion.
Okay. That would be fine with me.
That's fine with the seconder as well.
I forget who it was.
Rob's thinking $1,400.
Maybe I'm cheap, but hey, there's somebody up in that camera saying $1,500. I'd like to have it. $1,491.88. I'd like to have it.
Well, it's up to you. I do need you to accept the amendment or not. If not, then we have to have a further discussion.
No, that's fine. Let's go for it.
Thank you, Rob. So the modified motion is simply to waive the $1,400 fee. Otherwise, everything else in the recommendation stands. All in favor? That's carried. Opposed? Okay, that's passed. Thank you. Number 2, you're on again, Jeff. This is surplus equipment, Gov Deals Report, Public Works. The recommended motion is that council receive and accept the report titled Surplus Equipment Sales, and further that council approves any surplus funds to be placed into the respective departments' reserve accounts. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Rob? Yeah. Sure.
Through you, John. I took a look at this. It's quite neat. And this relates to previous questions I had during budget as to where the money goes when we sell something and so on and so on. So I just wanted to ask Jeff, how often do we wait until we've got a certain amount of equipment before we put it on Gov Deals? Or is it a monthly or quarterly or biannually? How often we do this when we collect it up?
Through you, revise. I got it right. Normally we try to do it annually, but this was kind of a backlog of some COVID items that we had, and some fire items, some parks and rec items that we've just held on to for longer than we should have, but it was an extensive list that we normally wouldn't have a list that size.
Through you, John. There were some items on.
So let's get it on the floor. Let's get the motion.
Okay, of course. Yes, we're working with the new world, aren't we?
That's right. So you're moving it. Can I get a
Moving
seconder?
to talk about it.
Can I get a seconder? Sherry. Okay,
There
carry
we
on.
go. This is going to become. This is a hard habit to break, isn't it? It is true. In regards to this, through you, John, I was just looking through some of the items, and I was checking by the way, it was difficult to read because it's on 2 forms. I had to kind of count the lines. One of the things I'm thinking is that I'm thinking about the residents of Stone Mills. And for example, the Honda 5,000 watt generator went for a couple $100, $200. It is what it is. You put it out there, you get what you get. I don't know what kind of repair it's in. It could be seized up tight for all I know and be parts only. But I'm just wondering if we're going to put together a list like this, maybe it would be to the advantage of the people in Stone Mills if we put a link to our account and broadcast it in maybe a week prior or 2 weeks prior on our social site to give the people that tax money that paid for these items a chance to buy them. I know there's a lot of people in this township would love to have had that generator for $200. So I'm just thinking as a service to the taxpayer, when we have to dispose of items, it makes sense, but it would be great if we let them know maybe. And also, I think we would actually get more money out of the items if they don't have to travel far to get them. Just a thought.
Jake wants to respond to that. Jeff, is that okay? Yeah, go ahead.
He's probably going to say the same thing.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually brought this list of surplus items to council for approval to be surplused, probably under the old council. And yeah, that list was, and it was told like explicitly at the meeting that these things were going to be appearing on Gov Deals over the next couple of months. So, I mean, they were given some notice, and like that Honda generator, I didn't tell anyone at a meeting that I thought it was going to go for a couple $100. To be honest with you, I would have guessed that it went for more than that. But definitely the public in Stone Mills, if you were tuned into that meeting, would have been made aware that there was a generator, going on Gov Deals in the next couple of months. So.
Go ahead, Rob.
Through you, John. And obviously, yes, I mean, we know that, and not to sound sarcastic, but you can imagine the people that hover over our meetings and our minutes waiting to see those announcements. I guess what I'm getting at is that when I was campaigning, I heard a lot about, we don't get any services and this and that. We pay these taxes. I'm thinking, this is a no-brainer. Just as soon as we approve the items that are going to be listed, and we know for sure they're going to happen, it'd be great to send that out and broadcast that to our people who paid for these items, some grants here and there, I suppose, and give them a chance to buy them, especially if some of these items went for a song, in my opinion, knowing a lot of what the value of these items are. It'd be great to give our taxpayers an opportunity to buy them at an inexpensive rate. Plus, I think that they would actually pay more than someone coming from the Toronto, Ottawa, or a larger urban center. There's no travel time. So just a thought for future, maybe we should say, if it goes forward in a meeting, next thing we should do is put that to our people that put it out and broadcast it. I think you'd get positive response and a lot of smiles in Stone Mills. That's all.
Okay. I think Jeff might have a comment as well.
Just thank you. Just one thing to add to CBO Detler. It was on the council agenda, but it also went on our social media, also went on our website. So short of having mail outs, we tried to reach the public as much as we could locally.
Through you, John. It's okay. That's what I was getting at. I didn't see it. That's great that it did happen. So we're already doing that. So I guess the next step is for council to pick up what you're putting down and broadcast it, because I know that would be seen as beneficial for the ratepayer. And every time we sit here, that's what we're doing, right? So thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
This new way of presenting stuff here. I had one change to the report also.
Okay.
So the 530G cat loader that hadn't been picked up yet, as of Friday, it was picked up. So that item we'll have the actuals for that item later this week, but they're pretty close.
Okay, that's good. That doesn't really require any amendment to
No.
the motion or recommendation. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, now we're down to the construction and maintenance agreement, item 3 under this section with the county. And the recommended motion is that council receives a report and attachment for the construction and maintenance agreement, and further that council approves the execution of the construction and maintenance agreement. Jeff.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jeff. I've got to get a move-in seconder first.
I have no changes anyway to this
Okay,
report.
Sherry and Crystal Lee. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. No changes to the report, but happy to answer any questions on the agreement.
Any questions? We have talked about this previously as well. I think this is a more flexible agreement, and it's very detailed. No further comment or question? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, Chief Building Official Detler. The staff update. This is a staff update on the Green and Inclusive Building Grant opportunity. And the recommended motion is that council receive the staff report. And that's it at this point, Jeff or Jake. So this is information and we're just going to receive it. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on it?
Through your worship, yeah, I received the motion to go ahead with making this grant application in the last meeting. So that's why I just made this a motion to receive, just with some information that I didn't have that was kind of hanging in the balance at the last meeting. Since then, we found out that the ice resurfacer, the electric ice resurfacer, can be part of this. And it would be really good to be able to point at that electric ice resurfacer in the future and say that 4/5 were, given to us through a federal grant. And that it just makes good dollars and cents in the sense that we have that budgeted already. And if we get the grant, then we can kind of wrap that budgeted dollar into the grant, meaning that you wouldn't have to budget too much in next year's budget to fulfill our needs for $1 million grant, for instance. Yes. And I mean, if it doesn't go forward, we can always, if for some reason our grant application is denied, then we can just go ahead with our original plan and order the electric ice resurfacer, which is already in our budget for this year. Another thing that I've found was that our 30-year-old roof at the Stone Mills Rec Center would need some pretty expensive upgrades before we would or should put, probably a 40-year lifespan solar panels on them. And maybe at this point in time, given there's some other maintenance work to be done in the facility that can be wrapped into a green grant, that we do the maintenance which is desperately needed on the infrastructure we already have, instead of at this point in time, investing in solar panels, which are something that would be a luxury, but we might not need at this point. So.
Did I get a mover for this? No, I didn't. Sherry. And Wendy. Any questions or further discussion? Yes, Wendy, go ahead.
Just one question. When do you hear whether you get approved?
Through your worship, the government, as in the federal government or the provincial government, doesn't usually give you a date, an exact date when they're going to announce whether or not your grant has been approved or not. Generally speaking, if they tell you that it's going to be in June, that you find out in August. So that's why probably they don't tell you. And a lot of the times when you find out, generally speaking, you can't tell the public sometimes for quite some time before the MPP or MP or sometimes both can announce it. So, yeah, I'm not aware of a date that's been posted in the guidelines as to when we find out whether a grant's been approved.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call a question. Oh, Rob, yeah, go ahead.
First of all, Jake, thanks for all your hard work on doing this. I know this was not an easy process of going through all of these things and weighing out all the possibilities. And game on for getting the nod towards that. I want to call it a Zamboni. It's not a Zamboni, it's Olympia. But the fact that you were hesitant you were actually leaning towards that it was going to be a no, and you've managed to get a nod. Like I say, approval's not here yet, but at least you're just looking that they would do that. That's well done. I think that's great. The other thing being is if we can get that, do we have to? Obviously, we have to order such an item. I'm sure they don't keep such a thing in stock. Do you know how long something like that takes to arrive? Would we be seeing that? I mean, you got to get your approval first, then you've got to order it. Does it have to land and be in place to get your money? Is there a timeline where they say, if you don't spend it by a certain date, it doesn't even count? How does that even work? Because this is something that's not construction based. This is a tangible item. It's a little different that way.
Through your worship, yeah, that's actually a really excellent question, Rob. I've been informed that the lead time for an electric Zamboni can be up to 360 days upon ordering it. And yeah, that is something that you would put in your timelines, which are pretty flexible for a large grant like this. Some grants are pretty inflexible in that this money has to be all spent, and that, electric Zamboni or that item in construction needs to be finished by a certain date. That will go right into the timeline that I'm actually putting in this grant, so that they, when they're reviewing this, can say the timeline on the electric resurfacer is, August 2024 or 2025, based on whatever lead time you're given. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The lead times for a piece of equipment are way more dramatically longer than they used to be with everything. And that's something that you should actually be thinking about and planning for when you fill out this application. So,
John, to you again. From the automotive side, I know that often, and I don't know how flexible they are, but it might be a suggestion to you if it's helpful, that as soon as the unit is serialized, that's basically the date of birth is what we used to call it. That means it exists and it can be registered and all of those good things that maybe you might be able to, if they get on your case a bit, maybe you can get that in your proposal. As soon as the unit is serialized, you can promise that it is officially a piece of equipment that we own or is coming our way. Maybe, and that would just buy you a little bit of breathing space. The other thing too is then maybe you're in a position where you can start marketing the other Olympia for next season. That's what I'm getting at, that you don't want to sit on the other Olympia for an off season, have it sitting in storage any longer than you have to. You're going to turn the key and it won't work one day. And what are you going to do with it then, right? So just thinking that far ahead.
Thank you for that comment. Anything further? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Items for consideration, request for advertisement in support of Tamworth 175th celebration. Robert Storing from Tamworth emailed, I think, Sherry and I, looking for a small expenditure to put an advertisement in, I forget what publication and the grapevine, right? And it didn't really have to come to council. It's a small amount, but more or less for public information. It's been brought here. Can I get a motion to approve that? Wendy and Crystal Lee, any discussion? Good. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Items for information. This is the Quinte Conservation 2023 Flood Warning Plan. The motion is that council receive this plan as presented. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Wendy and Sherry, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. New business and statements from members. Any new business or statements from staff? Jason?
If there's none from council, I'd like to share an update that we're very excited to share. Staff in consultation with the Federal Economic Development Agency, so FedDev, we've got the grant extension for the Tamler Skate Park that we have 75% completed. So that the positive news is that we have successfully extended that from March 31st into September 30th of 2023. So we now have a level of confidence that we're going to be able to finish this off with the concrete pour on the base. If you've been on site before the snow, I know there was concrete being poured while it was snowing, so you may not have seen the updates, but we poured up to Christmas, I think, like right around Christmas. It was all we could do to keep the concrete rolling in hopes that we were going to hit that deadline of March. And with this weather, we were very fortunate this winter to be able to do so. However, we were unsuccessful in getting the ultimate pad poured. So we now are thankful that we have approximately $40,000 left in that grant to carry forward. And we have this upcoming warm weather in summer to finish this off. So we're excited to make that project come to fruition and finish it off in the summer of 2023.
That's great. Does Carolyn know? All right, that's great. I assume you'll be letting her know. She'll be delighted, and so will the other volunteers involved in that. Something went through my mind while you were talking, and it's made its immediate exit, so it couldn't have been too important. Do we need to, I know what it was. It was about the closed meeting. Do we need to approve decisions made in closed meeting at this point, Brian? Or we don't have to? Okay, so we can move on to the confirming bylaw for this meeting. Sherry, seconder, please. Crystal Lee, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Sherry and Crystal Lee, all in favor? Thank you very much. That's good work today.